People may remember that it was reported that the Trump administration took back a nomination for you to be the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for mission integration. And Jewish Insider, this kind of rag that likes to write hit pieces, they're very pro-Israel. They take credit for reporting on your views on Israel and basically tanking this job offer. I want to know what your response is to both the Jewish Insider piece and also how you felt about having the job rescinded, if that is what happened.
I don't want to go into too many details just because I don't want to violate any confidence that some people have put in me. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus that doesn't deserve to be there, because I'll tell you, there were people that were fighting hard for me, and I will always value that. But in the end, that did. I actually was going to be the Deputy Director of National Intelligence, but that got sank because there were these voices that, and the Jewish Insider was one of many. Mark Levin was another one that was spreading all kinds of stuff. He forwarded a lot of those comments, et cetera. And listen, aside from me personally,
and the ADL.
Oh, yeah. And there's also another one called JFeed, which actually had a headline that said, "Victory. We got Tulsi Gabbard to drop Davis from the list here." And listen, that's not something to brag about. That's a shame, because what that's telling you is that there is some external entity that has power over who gets to serve in the United States government at even the highest levels. And, and we don't know all the details about what's happened with these three officials that were fired from the Department of Defense, from Hegseth, et cetera, Dan Caldwell and these other two fellas. But it sure looks like that they were not towing the line like they're supposed to on issues like the Iran potential war with Iran, et cetera. And that is a real problem that we need to get to, that needs to be addressed here. Because if we can't even say we're going to genuinely have our own country's priorities and needs set first, and that we have to trim our sails, we have to be afraid of what somebody from another country may say, then something is desperately wrong here. Because as much as I care a great deal about Israel, let me just be point blank on this. I actually love the people of Israel. I also love the people of Palestine. I'll just point out, I care about all of the people there. But when you say, okay, we're going to follow one path here that harms another group of people writ large, not just the Hamas terrorists, but all of the Palestinian people. And then if you don't hold that view, you're going to be prevented from serving in the United States government. Something is desperately wrong, and we need to get that fixed.
Well, let's turn to one of those officials from the Pentagon who was fired under Pete Hegseth, Dan Caldwell. He recently spoke to Tucker Carlson, and in his remarks, it sounds to me like he was blaming a group called the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, which is a pro-Israel think tank that has been pushing regime change in Iran.
That's why people want war with Iran. I think when it comes down to it, is a lot of people still think you can do regime change wars successfully in the Middle East.
Regime change wars? I thought this was all about getting rid of the whatever half dozen Iranian nuclear sites because we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
Well, I think Donald Trump has exposed them, because they're essentially, some of the biggest advocates of war with Iran, whether it's groups like Foundation for Defense of Democracy, writers at certain publications. Essentially, they are saying the problem with diplomacy is it doesn't lead to regime change, is that the policy should be regime change. It's almost like the nuclear issue is really about creating a pathway to regime change. And it really still goes back to this idea, is a lot of them deep down inside believe, and some of them say it out loud, that we could have made Iraq successful. And Iraq is just a mess. It is an absolute just cluster.
So that's very powerful, Dan Davis. Dan Caldwell is basically calling out a specific group, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and pointing out that they're pushing regime change. And it's those kinds of forces that are not only trying to get the U.S. involved in another conflict, but are helping to push out officials in the Pentagon who disagree.
Yeah, I've had a lot of issues with freedom of FDD, as they're sometimes called, for a long time. I've actually debated some on some television programs, and I think they have just almost the worst advice that I've ever seen. And the things that they advocated, push for, don't work. And nobody ever goes back and calls them on this thing that they have advocated for all these things in the past. And then all of a sudden, now they want to argue these new things here, especially with Iran. And gracious, I mean, if it doesn't take much military expertise to be able to look and say, if you start a war with Iran, number one, you may not win it, because unlike, like, say, Syria or even Iraq, the Iranians have some very potent capabilities, and they can fight back if we go to the wholesale war against them. But then they don't even think about the backside. What if you succeeded? What do you think is going to happen next? That you're going to have usher in some kind of peace? I mean, how did that work out with Iraq when we got rid of Saddam Hussein? We have a very Iran-friendly government that was in there. What happened when we went into Libya and got rid of Gaddafi? There's still a split government to this day. I mean, it's disaster everywhere you go and try it, and it doesn't work anywhere. And we don't have to go much farther to Afghanistan as well. And every time we try something like that, it just turns into disaster. And yet these people are myopic, and they can't see the track record, the hideous track record that has been in the past. They can't see the military fundamentals that exist in plain sight if anyone's willing to look at them. And then they have this imagined outcome that it can improve things, when almost all it will do is get lots of people killed, to include Americans, to include Iranians, to include Israelis. All kinds of people will die to have this fiction that you can improve something, and all they're going to end up doing is worsening it for everybody. It's really egregious.
Speaking of Iran and Israel, the rescinding of your job offer, the policy we're seeing now from Trump, suggests that there really isn't a lot of daylight, as the saying goes, between the two presidents when it comes to Israel-Palestine, and perhaps even among all presidents. I mean, how much room does the Israel lobby leave presidents to have their own policy when it comes to that region?
You know, there's something wrong with even the way the question was framed there. How much freedom do they have for their own policy? What that's even asked is illumination of the real problem here. And really, though, I got to say, it gets down to leadership, and it gets down to, are you a strong leader or not? You could be influenced. You can have a lot of people design things, but if you constantly give in to that, and if you do what they ask and you're afraid to stand up against anything, I'm just going to be saying it straight. That is the implications that you're not a very strong leader, because I want somebody in my country that will listen to people. And like I said, I'm friendly to Israel too. And if there's joint help, if there's things that are mutually beneficial, cool, let's go down that path. But when those interests diverge and all of a sudden you want to go down a path that's harmful to mine, you're on your own. I'm not going to go there with you, and not even going to consider it. So unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be many that have been occupying that top spot that have that attitude, which is another problem.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I saw you were interviewing Douglas McGregor, and you asked him kind of to explain Trump's policy, and he just said the Israel lobby. And I'm wondering if there's anything that goes in the other direction. There's a big debate, it's like the wag the dog debate. Is it that the Israel lobby controls U.S. foreign policy and forces it to act against its own interest? Is it that there's something that the U.S. gets out of Israel? Like Joe Biden famously said, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent her. Is there any way that the United States historically has used Israel for its own self-interest, or does it do so now?
I'm sure that there's some marginal benefit around the edges somewhere. And like I said, there are some areas where we have mutual benefit. We, at least ostensibly, both want freedom and democracy and peace and stability, et cetera. Though that's the definitions change. But I will say, right, yeah, obviously I have a big problem with that. But I will say, though, on the positive side, that unlike the Biden administration, Trump does appear willing to push back sometimes, because, he started off just really antagonistic toward Iran and making it sound like in the 1st of March that the decision for war had already been made and we're running out of time and all this. And then now that at least he's willing to say, well, actually, let's see if we can have a negotiated settlement. Because I think at the heart of it, Trump really is an America firster, and he doesn't like war. So at least so far, there's a chance that he's going to be able to push back on that. Now, we'll see how that goes. We'll see if Israel says, all right, you either do this or we're doing it on our own and drag you in, which is, I think, kind of like what they did with the Biden administration, put them in a what they thought was a no-win situation, and then Biden ended up giving into it and helping with our armed forces. I mean, why is the U.S. 2 aircraft carrier strike groups in the Middle East right now? Why are all of our bombers at Diego Garcia as though it's an extension of the Israeli Air Force? That's a big problem to me. But I'm still hopeful that there is enough, because pushback in the other direction. And there are more people in the administration right now who are on the side of doing something that makes sense and it's logical and it's not going after war than there have been in a long time. And I hope that they can continue to hold positive sway.
But if they don't, does that suggest that Trump isn't actually an American firster, or that his being an American firster is secondary to other concerns and pressures?
I mean, that we would have to make that assessment once it happens. But I would say, though, if we go to war with Iran, absent a direct attack by Iran against us, number one, it'll violate the Constitution, it'll violate the 1973 War Powers Act, and it'll violate common sense, because there is no reason for us to attack another country that hasn't attacked us and that has been deterred since 1979. There is absolutely no reason. And if we take that unilateral action, then there will be a lot of questions to answer.